Amazing. Welcome, everybody. So last week we talked about Hargasha and what a Hargasha might or might not look slash feel like, and how accurate that would be trying to put that into words when it's actually something that's really quite internal and the difficulty with that. Today, we're going to continue talking about Hargashas, and we're going to talk about how we look at Hargashas nowadays, meaning, okay, so then maybe in the 1500s, people were reporting Hargashas and that was totally normal and they were in touch with their bodies. What about now? What about in 2024? What are women reporting or feeling, or what do they do about it if they feel X, Y, or Z? And then what happens specifically with a badika cloth? Because that's going to be relevant really practically, lehalacha. So that's the last topic, and that'll be it for today. So who does have a book? Who can I? Yay! Amazing. Okay, so let's get started. Hi, welcome back. Can we welcome you back by starting us
Yes,
off in the middle of page
thank you.
38?
I'm
Hargasha in our
excited. I'm excited about my book. Okay. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week. Okay. Page 30, what part?
Hargasha in our time.
Hargasha, exactly. Hargasha in our times.
Um, oh, you know what?
Do you have a
Um,
different
yes. Okay.
format?
I have an older version. Okay, fine. Hargasha in our times. Okay. So do women nowadays still experience the type of Hargasha described by the Gemara, Rishonim, and Achronim? The Darkei Tshuva reports that it had long been assumed that women no longer experience the sensation of a Terumat Hadashan.
So remember, the Truman Adeshan said that the Hargasha is when you feel your uterus opening. So that was his definition.
Good. Okay, Darkei Tshuva Yoredea. The Ramban writes, I have been told by elderly women that women no longer feel a sensation of the opening of the uterus at all. However, some achronim, such as the Tzitz Eliezer, have noted that these cited comments do not appear in the writings of the Ramban. Rather, their source is from the achronim. Accordingly, some have challenged this position and claim that such a sensation still exists.
Oh, all right. Rebecca, you're next on my screen.
The Tzitz Eliezer. These words were written with all due respect in gross error, nothing like the formulation. I have been told by elderly women that women no longer feel the sensation of the opening of the uterus at all, is mentioned anywhere in the words of the Ramban. It was the language of the Teshurat Shai that misled him. Accordingly, of course, now that it is clear that this was not stated by the Ramban, but rather by the author of the Teshurat Shai, that he heard from elderly women, it is an entirely different matter. Clearly, these women do not represent the majority of women, and one cannot use this report as any sort of basis for halachic application. Note that the numerous places in the Shulchan Aruch and tens of responsa works in which questions were raised by women who experienced the sensation of the opening of the uterus. Thus, evenly today, there certainly is a sensation of the opening of the uterus. Despite the claim that women still experience a Hargasha, it still seems that in our time, most women do not experience the sensations mentioned above, other than possibly the Niddah Yehuda's version.
So that
Does
was
that mean
the sensation of an internal flow. That's the Niddah B'Yehuda version.
does that mean that their regular menstruation does not render them Niddah Midoraita? A number of approaches have been taken to this question by the Achronim and contemporary poskim. According to the approach taken by the Tzitz Eliezer, based upon the Pardes Rimonim, any symptoms that women have upon experiencing their period qualify as a Hargasha as well.
Hang on. Okay, so I'm going to back you up for a second because the Tzitz Eliezer there was explaining why he thinks that actually the Rambam never said that. And it's a very helpful note at the bottom of the page, note 7. The Churat Shai refers to the commentary of the Ramban and then mentions the comment of the elderly women. According to the Tzitz Eliezer, his words were misconstrued by the Darkei Tshuva to mean that the Ramban quoted the elderly women, while in reality, the Ramban was referenced in connection with the previous line, and then the comment of the elderly women was written by the Churat Shai himself. So that's why the Tzitz Eliezer is poo-pooing it. It's not coming from the Ramban, it's coming from the Churat Shai. So that's the piece. And he says that's not true, that women don't feel it anymore. Look at all the responsa, look at all the halachic works. they're mentioning something that clearly was still happening and women were still reporting. All right. And then thank you, Rebecca. You introduced us to the next piece, which is maybe, and this is related a little bit to footnote number 6, and we're going to see it somewhere else, that the question is, so we have, up till now, we've been saying that you become a Niddah d'Oraita only with a Hargasha. And then we've been struggling to figure out what a Hargasha is. But it's possible that the Hargasha is not a reason for you to become a Niddah d'Oraita. It's not a siba, excuse me. It's a siman. It's actually just a sign that that has actually happened. So you would treat things differently if you weren't waiting for a Hargasha to be the defining moment, but rather saying, oh, look, you had a Hargasha. That's because you were already a Niddah d'Oraita, and therefore, of course, you had the appropriate Hargasha at that time. But whether or not you had the Hargasha, you were still a Niddah d'Oraita for whatever reason, because you had a flow of blood, etc. So he's going to start playing now the Tzitz Eliezer with, okay, so what would that look like in modern times? We might not call it a Hargasha, in the sense of those 3 experiences that we described last week, but maybe there's something more general or more widely acknowledged, right? That we could use nowadays. I hope any of that made sense. Bella, you're next on my list, but I don't imagine you brought your book down to the beach.
Yeah, but I could read from the WhatsApp.
That would be amazing.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
here. A second approach is taken by Rav Moshe Feinstein
Oh,
that
one
we
second.
accept.
Pop
know.
back up and just read the
Wait.
second piece of the Tzitz
Oh,
Eliezer.
sorry, yes. The Rambam is clear when he says that women feel certain symptoms when they menstruate, such as yawning, sneezing, indigestion, or aches and pains in the stomach, and the like. It is clear that women today experience at least one of all the Hargasha before or during the beginning of their period.
So
The
he's
second
calling,
approach, sorry.
so sorry, but he's calling all these premenstrual symptoms, which are much vaguer and much broader than the 3 specific things that we had defined last week. And he's saying, yeah, that's what happens when women get their periods. When they have their periods, they're Niddah d'Oraitas. And we can call that a Hargasha in the modern sense, in the modern experience. Okay, so one second, I'm going to get Tehila. Are you available to take us into the next piece? Because the bottom line there, the bottom 2 lines on 39 are actually an intro to the Rav Moshe.
I don't have the text in front of me, sorry.
No worries. Ayala, you're next on my rounds. Do you have the text yet?
I'm nursing, so if baby wakes up, then okay. So I'm trying to find it on the one that you had here. So we're looking at the Tzitz Eliezer one.
Yeah,
on page 39.
The bottom of page 39. So we just read the second Tzitz Eliezer, and now I'm going to ask you to read
Okay, the second
intro
approach.
to the to the Rav Moshe.
So a second approach is taken by Rav Moshe Feinstein that we accept the opinion of the Nodab Yehuda. But women today are unable to differentiate between the sensation of blood leaving the uterus and blood oozing out of the body and causing moisture on one's garments. Therefore, we should be machmir and consider such a sensation to be a bona fide hargasha. Okay, so then the Igrot Moshe says, it is not known to our women today when they experience a sensation of the blood leaving the body, if it's from the vaginal canal or from the uterus. But there's no practical difference today as to the woman's knowledge and sensation where the blood comes from, since the sensation of a liquid coming out is considered a hargasha. And although the Chavot Dat and the Nodab Yehuda discussed this, that perhaps simply sensing blood exiting the vaginal canal is not considered a hargasha, we are much worse than they and cannot discern where it comes from.
So again, it just keeps getting broader. Even though last week we said, feeling it coming out of your body, who knows? That could have been anything. He says, yeah, it could have been anything. And we don't really see that women can distinguish where it came from nowadays. If I have something that leaves my uterus or something that is sitting around in my vaginal canal, when it exits, it just feels like it's exiting. It doesn't feel like it specifically came from A, B, or C. So nowadays says Rav Moshe, we need to be machmir. And anytime there's blood coming out of your vagina, we're going to assume that it came from the uterus. All right.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you,
question?
Ayala. Yes.
So he's saying that anytime you feel something coming out, that's a Hargasha. But does that mean that it makes you Niddah just whenever you feel it or when you see it?
That's a great question. So we're sort of that's our next topic, actually, a Hargasha without evidence of bleeding, right? Because that's what
Okay.
you're asking. Like, what if I have a
No,
Hargasha
because
and
I'm wondering, like,
there's
let's say
nothing
you
there?
feel something, but it could be not blood. Like,
Exactly.
also it could
Exactly.
be discharge. So,
That's what we're going to do next.
yeah,
Next
okay.
page. So hold that thought. I planted you especially. And then I have next Rachel. I'm not even sure who I'm seeing. If you're available and not busy with something else, let us know. We'd love for you to continue.
You are right. It is Rachel, but
Yeah.
I am just getting ready to take my baby to the doctor, so I'm not so available right now.
Absolutely. So you'll just listen in. Vanessa, you
That's
are
okay.
up.
Okay. A third approach is taken by the Aruch HaShulchan that women do experience Hargasha today, but are not necessarily attuned to it to detect it. In his opinion, the sensation of the uterus opening is parallel to the minor discomfort that one experiences when urinating. Okay. Aruch HaShulchan Yora Da'ah. The concept of Hargasha can be understood simply as Tasafot, right, that the opening is closed, and when the blood exits, it opens, and she should feel it. That is why the Gemara compares it to the sensation of urination, where there is a small amount of pain, as the Gemara states, and the pain is felt at the time of the opening of the uterus, just like when one begins to urinate, which is something everyone can feel, that a person has a small amount of pain, like a small stinging sensation, until it comes out. And those women who claim they do not feel it speak nonsense and do not know what they are saying, and our sages are more credible than they. However, they are not lying, rather, they simply do not understand.
So that's, on the one hand, it's quite fierce to say that they don't know that they don't have a Hargasha. On the other hand, he says what's really happening here is a miscommunication. They are feeling something, but they're not recognizing it or describing it in the way that Chazal did. And that's why we're having this issue. But absolutely, women today are still having Hargashas. That's his position. All right. A fourth approach. Here we go. A fourth approach is taken by Rav Yosef Shalom Eliashiv. In their opinion, women today indeed do not experience a Hargasha the same way that women did in earlier times. Rather, Rav Eliashiv writes that even according to Torah law, the significance of the Hargasha stems from its place as a symptom of menstruation. And that's what we were talking about before. Is it a siba or siman? For women who never experience the specific symptom, there's no great import to its absence. And those women experience the ritually impure midoraita even without a Hargasha. Rav Mordechai Willig accepts this approach in practice as well. This is Rav Willig taken from Rav Sobolowski's book. The Aruch HaShulchan assumes that women today are distracted and therefore unaware of the sensation that must accompany Niddah blood. This position is difficult. The Gemara states that a woman awakens from her sleep when the sensation of Niddah blood occurs. Women today generally do not awaken. Why is there a Niddah by Torah law today? The Rashba writes that it is the normal way of women to feel sensation when Niddah blood appears. One can suggest that if nowadays it is normal to have a period without the sensation of earlier generations, the woman is Niddah by Torah law since she sees blood normally. This is how it's normal in our generation to see blood. We don't have the stinging, the opening, the whatever it is. So this is a normal period. We're going to call that a Niddah d'oraita. I mean, the Torah is clearly talking about a normal menstrual cycle. Whatever that looks like nowadays is what we're going to call Niddah d'oraita. So it's actually a very interesting approach. Chai, you are next.
Okay, sorry. A Hargasha without evidence of bleeding. Do you have the same thing? Because I'm reading from an older
Yes.
version.
Perfect.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Thank you.
This is fascinating, by the way. Okay. Thus far, we have explored the issue of determining the status of Niddah when Hargasha is absent. What about the opposite case? Is a Hargasha so significant that the Hargasha alone can affect Tuma even in the absence of an impure discharge? The Terumat Hadeshen answers that a woman who experiences a Hargasha is indeed considered impure on a D'oraisa level. And response to Terumat Hadeshen, it seems that if a woman experiences a Hargasha and subsequently examines herself without discovering any signs of impure discharge, she must be considered ritually impure. Certainly, such a woman must have discharged at least a mustard seed's volume of blood, and it must have been wiped away or dissolved. This is because a Hargasha is a Doraita consideration, i.e., its presence is significant enough to assume that a woman is a Niddah, so long as she cannot attribute the sensation to something else.
And that's where, Bella, we're going to see.
And the
More
Shulchan Aruch
question,
cites
right?
this opinion. Oh, sorry.
Hang on, I'm just gonna say, so the Terumat Hadeshen says, even if there's absolutely nothing there, you're a Niddah, because why else would you have had a Hargasha? Hargasha is like a pretty serious thing, right? As we've been discussing, many women don't even have one. So if you really have one, it seems like something happened. So now, oh, you've all moved around. I think because somebody had to go, maybe. So Vanessa, you're next again. Sorry, you get two very close together.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Hargasha without evidence of bleeding.
Okay, so we did that first little piece. Can you take us from the Shulchan Aruch, that last little yellow line on page 41? The Shulchan Aruch cites the opinion.
Okay. The Shulchan Aruch cites the opinion of the Terumat Hadeshen without ruling definitely in accordance with it.
And then the top of page 42 is where the Shulchan Aruch actually is.
Shulchan Aruch Yoreh Da'ah. If she feels her uterus has opened in order to discharge blood, but she does not find anything when she later examines herself, one opinion holds that she is impure.
Beautiful. So he mentions it, and that one opinion is clearly referring to the Terumat Hadeshen, but he doesn't really say, and she's impure or she's not impure. He says, there's an opinion, which is I don't have the statistics on how often the Shulchan Aruch leaves us hanging like that, but I think most of the time he's there to let us know what to do. So it's interesting that it was enough that he wanted to mention it, but not enough that he wanted to definitively say we hold like that.
Can I just ask a question, please?
Mm-hmm.
I remember I did not know I was yet pregnant, and I kept feeling something was coming. So where would that have put me? And it's like, which
Yes.
place am I?
That is 100% an issue that a lot of women have, because some of us really are in touch with our bodies and we do feel things happening. So if, according to the Terumat Hadeshen, if you felt it and there was no evidence of anything, then you might have to assume that you were a Niddah, but you're going to see in two sources, what if you had found something that I was actually a neutral, if you found yellow or green or whatever, then we would attribute that sensation to what happened. So clearly you were feeling a discharge. It just so happened you were feeling a discharge of something that was tahor, not tummy. So
I see.
spoiler alert, that's what's coming.
Okay.
Rebecca, we're back to you for the intro and the Pitrei Tshuva, if you don't mind.
Okay. So the discussion, that's right.
Yeah.
In the Terumat Hadeshen of whether one is impure biblically after experiencing a Hargasha without any bleeding relates to this type of Hargasha.
His type, to the Terumat Hadeshen's type,
His type.
right? Which was the uterus opening.
Discussed above, experiencing the sensation that one's uterus has opened. The Achronim debate whether the same ruling applies equally to all three types of Hargasha. The Pitrei Tshuva cites the Chochma Adam, who holds that it does not apply to the Hargasha of shuddering, since that may be attributed to other factors. The Pitrei Tshuva. The Chochma Adam writes, with regard to the Hargasha that her limbs are shuddering, she would not be ritually impure if she examined herself without discovering an impure discharge. In that case, the shuddering would be attributed to another cause.
So interesting, right? The Terumat Hadeshen, it's pretty clear when your uterus opens, it's discharging something. But if you shudder, actually, could be a number of reasons. So we're much less likely to rush to the assumption that it was a bleeding issue. Who knows? Maybe she had a fever. Maybe I don't know, whatever the other reasons are that you might shudder. So that's good to know. Tehila, we're back to you if you're available.
Sorry, I still don't have the text, but I am
Oh,
wondering, is
sorry.
like it available online?
Are you on the WhatsApp group?
Yeah, but I just joined it about 10 minutes ago because Bella said something about finding it on the WhatsApp, and I guess it was posted earlier.
No worries. Okay, it's totally my fault that I could not remember from 1 minute to the next that you didn't have the book. So forgive me, I'm going to probably call you on next round also. That's where we're at right now.
Oh, no, oh,
And Bezrat Hashem, for next week, you're going to have it all. Ayala, how are you doing? No pressure.
I'm okay. We're good.
Okay, so can I get you to do the
Yeah.
middle of 42?
Okay, so although the Hargasha may be significant even when a woman does not see any discharged blood, the Shulchan Aruch states that the Hargasha will not render her ritually impure if she's accompanied by a neutral discharge, i.e., a discharge with no signs of blood. In such an event, she may safely presume that sensation was triggered by the neutral discharge and there's no reason to question her status.
Okay.
Okay, so then the Shulchan Aruch source says only a white appearance is ritually pure as well as a greenish appearance, even if it has the appearance of wax or gold, and all the more so something as green as leek or herbs. The Rama said, and blue is included in the category of green. This is true even if it has the viscosity of blood and is very thick, and even if she has a sensation that her uterus is opened, if she examines herself immediately and discovers one of these, she remains ritually pure. The Rama said this is a primary ruling, unlike those who are stringent and rule that such a mara is ritually impure if it is thick.
Beautiful. So some people might even want to be stringent about that and say, well, like the texture seems very cloddy, even though the color is not problematic. But the Rama says, in a again in a rare moment of Ashkenazim not getting carried away, the Rama says, no need to be stringent. All right. So that's really so thank you, Bella and Vanessa, for both guiding us to those issues. Because yeah, that's a pretty practical question. And now we're going to talk a little bit about Badika cloth, which of course is also highly, highly relevant. Rachel, I'm assuming that you're busy with the doctor's appointment. So Bella, I'm going to move to you.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Um, I remember when I was um, discussing um, Hargasha with my Kala teacher, I think we spoke about sensations that are unique to the flow of blood, meaning that if there are sensations that could be blood, could discharge, if there are things that, could be cramps, could be indigestion, and they're like, they don't have a unique experience associated with Niddah, they don't necessarily fit the realm of Hargasha. I've been listening to the various Shita that we've been reading today, trying to see if that fits in there, but I don't know if I'm seeing a direct match. So I just was wondering where that could fit in,
Great
or
question.
if you're familiar with that kind of approach to Hargasha.
So
Yeah.
there are two things. The first is that um, you know, Rev Willig was saying that anything that's a normal premenstrual symptom could qualify as a Hargasha nowadays. However, I think even he would say that if that symptom is not necessarily premenstrual, but could also be, IBS, could also be I haven't eaten in too many hours, could also be whatever, million things cause a woman's stomach to hurt or feel a little bit off, then we wouldn't assume that that's what it was. It's similar in a way to what we just were reading, that sometimes you have that symptom, but it's actually nothing to do with Niddah. Maybe you had a discharge, and that's why you're feeling your uterus open, but actually it was discharging something that was completely tahor. Maybe you have a stomach ache, and sometimes you have that stomach ache when you are menstruating, but you also have that stomach ache at, five other different times. So that's something that makes sense and is in line, I think, with what we were seeing here. The other thing that I would mention, and I don't know if this was part of your conversation with your college teacher, is that there's a difference between the Hargasha, which is defined fairly uh, clearly and definitively, and Veset Haguf, which is where you have a physical symptom that always indicates the beginning of your period. So that for different women, that might be individual, right? And it's not something general like, oh, I feel really bloated. Oh, I'm going to kill everybody in the house. Oh, like I must be getting my period. But actually, it's something very specific. I actually had a Kala once who said, my breasts get very tender for a few days, and then when they stop being tender, I know I'm getting my period that day. 100%. It's never not. It doesn't never signifies something else. So that would be a Vesed Aguf, which is not a Hargasha issue. It's a little bit different. I don't know if I've muddied the waters or helped you see a parallel.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering then, um, in a situation where, let's say we're talking about the example with the feeling that could be discharge, could be blood, it sounds like there is an impetus to like run and check. Is that the case?
So it's a good question. So sometimes women know that they have these hargeshas all the time. So sometimes when you first start learning this and it becomes relevant, what people will suggest is to do a badika 3 times when you feel that sensation and see, does it always mean menstruation or does it sometimes mean yes, sometimes mean no? Meaning we just try to establish a chazaka that it's not always menstruation. So that's one way of approaching it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, amazing. Blah blah blah, and then Rebecca. I think we're back to you. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds good.
amazing. So we only have a page and a half, but we have to read fast.
Okay. Wait, we're up to
Hargasha and Badika class, top of
okay.
43.
As we have seen, a woman generally does not become a Niddah on a Torah level without Hargasha. Nevertheless, the Gemara Niddah mentions that one who sees blood when performing a Badika internal examination becomes a Niddah, or must begin counting again if she is in the midst of her Shevanakiyim, since she may have experienced the Hargasha while performing the Badika, but the contact with the examination cloth masks the Hargasha. Masechet Niddah. Come and hear the Mishnah below. With regard to an examination cloth that was placed beneath the pillow and blood was later found on the cloth, if the stain is round, it is ritually pure. A round stain could not have come from her examination, and if the stain is elongated, it is ritually impure, as this shape can be formed in an examination. The Gemara analyzes the Mishnah. What are the circumstances? If she sensed then, in the case where the stain is round, why is it pure? Rather, is it not referring to the case where she did not sense? And yet the Mishnah teaches that an elongated stain is impure. Evidently, a sensation is not necessary. The Gemara answers no. The Mishnah is actually referring to a case where she sensed, but since she also performed an examination, one might say that this was the sensation of the examination cloth. Consequently, if the stain was elongated, the blood certainly came from her body, but if it was round, it is pure, and it does not seem to have been produced by an examination.
Okay, so I don't know about you. I found this Gemara quite complicated. So I actually have notes, but I forgot them in my room. Hold on 1 second. Okay, we're back. So you remember, might have been the first week maybe, we talked about Shmuel. And Shmuel says, let's say a woman examines the ground, everything's clean, she sits down, and then when she gets up, there's blood underneath it. Okay, this is when we talked about the requirement of Hargasha. So if she didn't feel anything coming out, she's Tahora Deoraita. Derban is a separate issue, but Deoraita, because she didn't have Hargasha, she's Tahora. So this Gemara is discussing his position, and it says, listen, let's see how that lines up with the Mishnah, this coming Mishnah that we know. So if a stain is found on a badika cloth under your pillow, which it seems that she did a badika, but it was at night, she just threw it under her pillow and she wanted to look at it the next day, or basically she's not 100% sure that was the badika. She didn't look at it right away, let's say. Okay, so if it's round, says the Mishnah, then she's tahora, because it wouldn't have come from a badika. It must have dripped on there from something else. Maybe she had a nosebleed, who knows? But if it's elongated, then she's tamea. Okay, so then what situation are we describing? If it's talking about where she had a hargasha, then the round one should be tame too. So it must be talking about something where she didn't have a hargasha. And yet, if it's elongated, we're saying she's tamea. So that proves Shmuel wrong, because he would say without a hargasha, no shape would be a problem. So then we counter that. We say, no. It's not talking about a situation with no Hargasha. No way. It absolutely has Hargasha. The problem is she might not have felt that Hargasha because of the sensation of the aid. So if it's a shape that clearly came from a Badika, then we have to assume that she felt a sensation and didn't notice it. But if it's round, which means it just fell there and had nothing, it was not internal, then because it's round, we can assume that it didn't come from the Badika, and therefore she'd be Tahora. Okay. But the point here that they're trying to make after all that is just that there is the possibility of the Badika itself, the sensation of the Badika itself, masking a Hargasha, because that's a really important principle that is going to play out in the rest of our lives now. Yeah? Okay. Chai, we're back to you.
Okay. I'm lost, but it's all good. Okay.
Afterwards, I'm happy to stay longer. I'm like really trying to be
No,
good about
it's
timing.
fine. It's just like, wow, it's a lot. Okay, fine. We're up to Shulchan Aruch, your idea 190-33, right?
Perfect.
Okay.
And the intro is just that to the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with this principle that yes, a Badika could mask a Hargasha. So we're going to see it now play out in Halakha.
Okay, fine. So if a woman examines herself with a pre-checked aid, a cloth, as in, and like a discarded garment, are all our righteous deeds. Oh, interesting. Okay, from Yeshayahu. And a drop of even the size of a mustard seed of blood is then found to be on it. Whether it's round or elongated, the woman is ritually impure. The halacha is the same if she examines herself with it and places it in a box, and when examining it later, she finds any amount of blood upon it. Regardless of whether it's round or elongated, she is ritually impure. Rabbi David Yosef in Torah HaTahara summarizes the practical halacha concerning a stain found on a badika cloth within the context of the laws of katamim or stains, which render a woman impure on a rabbinic level. He notes that all of the standard guidelines and leniencies relevant to stains found on a garment, which will be discussed in detail in the next year, do not apply to a stain found on a badika cloth, which may render a woman a niddah on a biblical level based on the Gemara above.
And Vanessa, take us home.
Oh, my goodness, the pressure. Torah HaTahara. The general principles of stains apply specifically when a stain is discovered without an active examination. However, if a woman examines herself by inserting a pre-checked and clean aid in the proper location and discovers blood upon it, then she is possibly ritually impure on a biblical level. This is true of even the smallest stain, and even if the examination was done with paper or upon a colored cloth, and even if she has not experienced a sensation, having discovered blood, she would be judged as ritually pure only if she examined by wiping the external part of her anatomy without examining inside at all.
Beautiful.
Do you want me to close?
Summarize that. So he's saying as soon as you go internal, we have no guarantee that there wasn't a Hargasha. So it doesn't matter if it's on colored. We're going to see later that colored is significant. And paper, all these things are significant, but not once you go internally. The only time she would be ritually pure is if she only went outside and never went internal. That's the only time that you could assume that there was no Hargasha. And then, sorry, finish this off.
Another manner in which a woman may become a niddah, even without a Hargasha, is through bleeding as a result of an internal medical examination. This subject is discussed in more detail later in this volume.
Amazing. We made it. I'm happy to stay later if there's like lots to talk about, and I'm happy to stay. I just wanted to make sure that we were finished reasonably on time. For those who have to move on with their day. So thank you all. I'll stop the recording.
You.
No, I will not
I
stop.
guess it says